Most people that are watching this right now are 1 or 2 or 3 nutrients away from being the most optimal version of themselves. Every single person that came through our clinic system, and we saw close to 200,000, they always ask the same question: where do I start? Because I've been online and I got complete paralysis of analysis. So eating whole foods, supplementing for deficiency, prioritize our sleep, that's our human superpower, and exercise. Without the basics, nothing else matters. Pick up anything in the grocery store and spin it around and read the label and just ask yourself, do I know where to find this in this grocery store? That's a very easy way to start to get yourself towards a whole food diet. Shopping the perimeter of the grocery store, being cautious about the aisles. Sleep, I would argue, is the most bullied thing in our schedule. It's like the stepchild of our day. By drawing attention to your sleep, you can completely change the trajectory of your life. If you want to live a long time, you need to challenge your body. Dumbbells, barbells, cable workouts, even body weight exercises.
Wow, Gary Brecka. Welcome to Project 100, mate. This is cool. I used to think the only way to level up was by training harder or eating cleaner. But turns out the real game changer is sleep. Enter A-Sleep's newest generation, Pod 5. This isn't just another bed frame add-on. It's a high-tech mattress cover that actively adjusts to your body temperature throughout the night, cooling, warming, and even elevating your body when needed, all based on real-time data. The new Pod 5 introduces for the first time a hydro-powered blanket system, utilizing the same technology as the cover to extend temperature regulation across your entire body, not just the mattress surface. Now, it's clinically proven to increase quality sleep by up to 1 hour each night. It's basically like having an AI-powered sleep coach, personal thermostat, and advanced self-tracker working for you while you rest. Head on over to ahsleep.com/project100 and use the code project100, that's project100, and get up to $550 off your very own Pod 5. Trust me, your body will thank you for this investment in better sleep. Wow, Gary Brecka. Welcome to Project 100, mate. This is cool. I've been following you for ages, man. Thank you, I'm dying to talk to you.
Thank you. That's really kind of you, man. I'm excited to come to Australia, dude. My first Aussie tour.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's the 27th to 28th of June, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
And
yeah, that's right.
What is it? Sydney, where are you going? Sydney,
Sydney and Melbourne.
Sydney and Melbourne. And I know the audience is going to be off the charts because I know so many people who follow you. I mean, actually, my sons follow you. I got 4 sons. They follow you. They say, "Oh, this is Gary Brecka, dude." Dad. They were the ones actually introduced you to me on Instagram. That is
right.
A few years ago. What are you going to be hitting us up with when you come on the 27th and 28th? What are you going to be talking to the audience about?
We're basically going to be talking about just living your best life, like how to unlock the ultimate human inside yourself. You know, why sleep is our human superpower. What are 5 things you can do to just instantly improve your sleep? What are the best morning routines? I always take questions about supplementation. We'll talk about supplementing for deficiency, not just the sake of supplementing, which I feel a lot of people do. They supplement purely for the sake of supplementing. They're not really supplementing for deficiency because they read an article that St. John's wort or CoQ10 or ashwagandha or resveratrol was good. So they're piling all this stuff in and they don't really get that shit.
That's me. That's me, Gary.
That's most people, man. So we're going to talk about the best morning routines, the best nighttime routines, the best travel hacks. We're going to talk about cellular biology. You know, what are the breakthroughs, the true real breakthroughs in anti-aging and longevity science? Because if you want to get paralysis of analysis, start Googling around about longevity or anti-aging. You know, should you be using a red light? You know, what's the deal with sauna, with cold plunging, hyperbarics, all of those things.
So, okay, but all those things are things I like actually to touch on a few of those today. But before I do, you mentioned human biology. You're a human biologist, and normally what we do at the beginning of our show is we ask the guest, which is in this case, which is you, just to tell us a little bit about their background. So, like you know, your academic background, for example, and also maybe your working background.
Yeah. So, you know, by my my formal schooling is my undergraduate degree is in biology. I have a Bachelor of Science degree, a 4-year degree in biology. Then I went on to graduate school. I got a postgraduate degree in human biology. So another 4 years just on the biology of the human body. I was going to go on and to med school, but I decided to take a semester off. I ended up never going back. For 20 years, I was a mortality expert for large life insurance.
What's that mean?
Which meant that it meant that we were charged with building a model to predict mortality to the month. So in other words, when a life insurance company or annuity company or a reverse mortgage, you wouldn't believe the number of financial services instruments that are actually based on mortality. Annuities, reverse mortgages, obviously life insurance. But if they're getting ready to put $25 million worth of risk, or $30 million, or $40 million, $50 million worth of risk on your life, only one thing matters. Not where you are on an actuarial curve, but how many more months you have left on this earth. And so we were charged with, creating a model that would predict mortality to the month. And at that time, I was accessing one of the largest population databases in the world, had about 370 million lives in this database.
Wow.
Now, remember, life insurance companies have data that no other financial services enterprise has, right? They know the day, the date, the time, the location, and the cause of death for hundreds of millions of lives. And you can take that information, you can triangulate it back into the record. And what was astounding was that the reason why the majority of people are not living healthier, happier, longer, more fulfilling lives are for what we called modifiable risk factors, which meant mainly dietary and lifestyle changes that if they were to make those could add 7 years, not just to their lifespan, but to their health span.
Wow.
I'm a big part of the MAHA movement here in America, which is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s crusade to clean up our food supply, get the corruption out of our nutritional research and out of our public policy that's led to the poisoning of a lot of our food, petroleum-based food dyes, those kinds of things. And we can go down that rabbit hole. But essentially, when you look at what extends life, what truly extends life, what are the people doing that are living the longest? What's going on in the blue zones that's not going on in other parts of the world? Well, it's not dogmatic dieting. Right? It's not keto, paleo, pescatarian, vegan, vegetarian, raw food. It's eating a whole food diet, eating a diet that is completely devoid of highly processed foods. And then when you really start to dig into the research, you see that the esoteric things like sense of purpose, sense of community, mobility into later in life, these are all central to living a long life. And disease is present in bodies that are absent movement, that are absent sense of purpose, that are absent sense of community, and have the presence of forever chemicals that come from highly processed ingredients and highly processed foods. And so, it's really a message of hope and simplicity that if we got back to what God gave us and further away from what man makes us, this is the secret to unlocking longevity.
And I think one of the reasons, Gary, that someone like you has become so popular is that you are not a typical, in Australia we call them GPs, a general practitioner, and I'm not having a crack at general practitioners because they're trained into a system. We got Gary Brecka here, who is a human biologist, which, by the way, most doctors, GPs in Australia, they do biology degrees in any event. But Gary Brecka is not looking at it from the point of view of the training system that the general practitioner system trains our doctors in Australia to be. You're looking at it differently. And I think Australia, like America, but we're not as advanced as America in this, but Australians, I should say, particularly younger people, are very much looking for alternatives. They're sick of going to the doctor and the doctor's just giving them some pills and then you walk away and you don't feel any better. You take the pills, you might get rid of the flu or whatever the hell you had, COVID, whatever the case may be, vaccinations, etc. But you actually don't feel any better in the long run. It doesn't improve your life. And I think human biology, which is what you're talking about, is for me, is actually the beginning of a new steep curve of where we're going to go when it comes to how we look after our health, and which is one of the reasons I'm so excited about talking to you. And you talked about, and one of the things I do need to talk to you about straight away is this methylation program that you have. I really need to understand it. Can you explain to me what the hell that is?
Yes. So if I was to put up a chart, and I'll do this at my event in Australia, I'll show this to you very specifically, but if I was to put up a chart showing you your cellular biology, which is called a methylation chart, what you would see is like hundreds and hundreds, thousands of complicated pathways. This nutrient becomes this amino acid becomes this neurotransmitter. This neurotransmitter causes this mood, this emotional state. It causes this sense of awareness. This one drives behavior. You would see this complicated myriad. It looks like you just threw spaghetti against the wall. And the reason why I put that chart up is for what you don't see on that chart. Because what you don't see anywhere in this complicated myriad of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and amino acids are any chemicals, any pharmaceuticals, or a single synthetic. And you can go into this chart, and I bet if I blew it up large enough, every member of the audience, whether they have a biology degree or not, would know 90% of what's on that chart. You would see common names of vitamins, minerals, amino acids, raw materials, nutrients, magnesium, zinc, molybdenum, silicas, iron, vitamin D3. You would see how many places these are integral to your cellular biology. And so my message is that when you have a deficiency in one of these pathways, you get the expression of disease. So in other words, as you deprive the human body of certain raw material, you get the expression of that deficiency, which we call disease. We call it pathology, or we call it aging, or we call it brain fog, or weight gain, or water retention, or poor focus, or poor concentration. Or we have fancy names like ADD, ADHD, OCD, manic depression, bipolar, anxiety. But when you talk to a practitioner and you ask them a very specific question, what is anxiety? They'll tell you, they'll describe all the characteristics of it. It's a fear of the future. It's a sensation of an impending doom without the presence of a fear. It's a feeling of anxiety, maybe a rapid heart rate. Okay, those are all the characteristics of it. What's causing it? What is going on in my body that is causing me to feel this way? Why can't I shut my brain off at night? Why do I lay down to go to sleep at night and my mind is awake even though my body is tired? Why am I fasting and exercising and I'm not able to lose weight and gain muscle? Why do I not have the same response to exercise? Why is my short-term recall going? Why do I experience brain fog? I get a great idea in the bedroom and I walk to the kitchen and I wonder what the hell I'm doing in the kitchen. All these ailments that we chalk up to a consequence of aging or our environment or our relationships or our career are not a consequence of any of those things. They're a consequence of missing raw material. And so this is what brings us to methylation, because we have to understand first that there's not a single compound known to mankind, not one, that enters the human body and is used in the format that we put it in. Nothing. There is no mineral, no vitamin, no amino acid, no nutrient, no carbohydrate, no protein, nothing that we put into our bodies that gets used in the format that it comes in. Without a single exception, everything goes through a process of being refined into the form the body can use. I always use the example that we pull crude oil out of the ground, right? But you cannot put crude oil into your gas tank because your car doesn't understand that fuel source. We take crude oil, we refine it into gasoline. Now the car can run because it understands that fuel source. Human beings are no different. This refining process is called methylation. It is how we take a protein, a vitamin, a mineral, an amino acid, a nutrient of any kind, and convert it into the form the body can use. A very simple example would be folic acid. Folic acid, for the record, is an entirely man-made chemical. People have been led to believe that it's a natural B vitamin. It's not. You cannot find folic acid anywhere on the surface of the earth. We make it in a laboratory. It does not occur naturally in nature. Yet somehow we've been convinced that it's integral to a healthy pregnancy. It prevents neural tube defects. You need to supplement with folic acid. But the truth is the body can't use folic acid. Folic acid is useless unless you can convert it to methylfolate. And this is true for so many different compounds. So what our genes determine is our genes determine what we can convert and what we can't. And when we cannot make a certain conversion called methylation, we have a deficiency. And this deficiency leads to the expression of disease.
Wow.
If I was to ask your audience, and again, I'll do this at the event, by show of hands, how many of you have or know somebody that has hypertension or have or know somebody that has hypothyroid, or any number of conditions, type 2 diabetes, any of these conditions that run in families, and they've been told that they have a genetically inherited disease, that it is familial. Because if you go to your doctor tomorrow and he takes your blood pressure and your blood pressure's high, he's going to do a cardiac exam on you, and your EKG is normal, and your EEG is normal, and your heart sounds are normal, and your lung sounds are normal. Your whole cardiac workup is normal. You know what they're going to do? They're going to medicate the heart anyway. They're going to hold the heart responsible for a crime it's not committing. The next question they're going to ask you is, what's your family history? Oh, your father has high blood pressure, and your mom's uncle has high blood pressure. You have familial hypertension. You have genetically inherited hypertension. And the reason for that is, if I can get you to subscribe to the fact that you have a genetically inherited disease, I can get you to subscribe to a lifetime of medication. But if you were to take that one step further, Mark, and you were to say, well, what gene did I inherit from my ancestor that's causing this condition to exist? Their face would go blank. And the reason for that is that that gene does not exist, which means that disease does not exist. What we pass from generation to generation is rarely, if ever, disease. We don't inherit diseases from our ancestors. We inherit an inability for the body to refine a raw material, which causes a deficiency, which leads to that disease. And that deficiency can be fixed.
Wow.
Stop. So, we explain things in modern medicine. There's a term in modern medicine called idiopathic. It should be idiopathic, but it's idiopathic. And it means of unknown origin. And it's a way to actually diagnose something that you have no idea what's causing. So if you have high blood pressure and your heart's fine, you have idiopathic hypertension. If you have hypothyroid, your thyroid's fine, you have idiopathic hypertension. If you have Crohn's disease and we don't know what's wrong, you have idiopathic autoimmune disease. And so it's a convenient way to say, we don't know what's causing it, we're going to medicate you anyway. So, as a human biologist, I never had the luxury of chemicals or synthetics or pharmaceuticals. We always had to go into human physiology to find the answer. Was it a mineral? Was it an amino acid? Was it a vitamin? Is there a pathway that is broken that needs to be supplemented? And this is true in so many conditions. I mean, most people that are watching this right now are 1 or 2 or 3 nutrients away from being the most optimal version of themselves.
Wow.
And all they have to do is find that deficiency. You know what's crazy is, well, it's not crazy, but it's just ironic, is that we believe this in plant physiology, right? If you had I don't know how many palm trees you have in Australia, but let's say you had a leaf rotting in a palm tree in Australia. And you called a true arborist, like a true botanist, out to look at that leaf. They wouldn't even touch the leaf. They would core test the soil. And they'd say, you know what, Mark, there's no nitrogen in the soil. And they would add nitrogen to the soil and the leaf would heal. Human beings, I promise you, are no different. When we deprive the human body of certain raw material, you get the expression of disease. And this is true for mood disorders, and this is true for our focus, our concentration, our speed, our timing, our agility, our hand-eye coordination, our strength, our response to exercise, the depth of our sleep, our waking energy, how we process information. The body needs raw materials to engage in all of these activities. There's a very common, here in the US, 64% of Americans report at some point feeling major depressive symptoms. And we define depression as an inadequate supply of serotonin. So if you're unfortunate to suffer from depression, or you know someone who suffers from depression, which all of us do, we all know somebody who has had depression or has it, then the textbook would say this is a deficiency in serotonin. So you would think that if the definition of depression is low serotonin, that the fix would be to raise serotonin. But that's not what we do. We take people that are low on serotonin and we put them on SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. What does that do? It takes what little serotonin they have and it just rations it so they don't run out too quick. Okay, so by definition, it doesn't raise serotonin. So by its own definition, it never ends depression. This is why I have clients come see me all the time and I'll say, how long have you been on antidepressants? And they'll say, 15, 18 years. My first question is always, when did you think it was going to kick in? Right? Do you think we should run this maybe for another 2 or 3 years and just see if that's the magic moment? No, because if you actually were to take a step back and say, well, where's serotonin made? Well, 90% of the serotonin in your body is right here. And if you don't have it here, you can't have it here.
As in your stomach?
As in your gut.
In your gut.
90% of the serotonin is made in our gut. And how do we make it? How does the factory produce serotonin? Well, it takes an amino acid called tryptophan, the one that's famous for making you sleepy. We have Thanksgiving holiday here. We eat lots of turkey. Everybody passes out on the couch. Okay, that's high in tryptophan. We take tryptophan and we methylate it. We convert it into serotonin. And 90% of that serotonin is in our gut. It travels up our vagus nerve and it populates our brain and it participates in every elevated emotional state. Passion, elation, joy, arousal, libido, all the hell yeah, I won the lottery emotions. They all require that neurotransmitter. So if you have a deficiency in that neurotransmitter, you will eventually be told you have a mood disorder. Or you'll be one of those people that's just like, I'm just kind of mood numb. I'm not depressed. I don't want to jump off a balcony, but I just went on the vacation of a lifetime with the people I love the most to a place I always wanted to go. And I just couldn't get out of first gear, right? I couldn't I'm intelligent enough to look around and say, I should be really having a good time. I should be really enjoying this, but I can't feel it, right? I'm mood numb. And as we get older, this happens more frequently. So now you have a mood disorder.
According to the system.
According to the system.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have a mood disorder. You have a deficiency in the neurotransmitters that create mood and emotion. Why don't we go to the place in the body where the factory that produces those and turn that factory back on and wake those emotions back up? When you have autoimmune diseases, how many people have Crohn's or Hashimoto's, which is where you're manufacturing an antibody to the thyroid, or you have Crohn's disease, you're manufacturing an antibody to the colon, or you have Sjogren's, you're manufacturing antibodies to the lacrimal gland in the eye, or you're manufacturing to the blood, you have lupus, or I can give you, 1,000 of those. We're told, if we have been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, that you woke up one morning, Mark, and your immune system went haywire. It just decided it was going to attack the colon. We don't know why. It's out of control. We're going to have to hit it with some immune suppressants, and we're going to have to give you anti-inflammatories for the rest of your life because your immune system is just screwed up. Instead of, again, taking a step back and saying, what if we took the approach that the immune system didn't make a mistake? The immune system is acting properly. We just need to find out why it's acting that way. Because in human beings, when pathogens attack us, I'll just give you a very simple example. Let's say that this was a mold spore or a mycotoxin or a virus or a parasite or a heavy metal for that matter. And this was a healthy cell. This does not hide like this. It hides like this. That's an important distinction because the immune system is hypervigilant. It wants to get to this, but it's inside of this cell. When the immune system reaches the surface of the cell, it does not have permission to go inside. You know how the immune system creates permission to go through the cell wall? It manufactures an antibody to that cell. So if there was a bank robbery in Sydney and the bank robber ran into a building and barricaded himself in there, the police would chase him into that building. They would kick down that door to go in and get the perpetrator. The immune system is no different. It is hyper vigilant. It will blast right through a cell wall to get to the perpetrator. And you are holding the immune system responsible for a crime it did not commit. And so if we tested for these things and we said, oh my gosh, you have heavy metals bound to your thyroid, which is why your immune system is manufacturing antibodies to your thyroid. You have leaky gut causing bacteria and contents that should stay in the luminal area of your gut now are leaving and leaking into the bloodstream. This is what's calling the immune system to these locations. Why don't we help the immune system? Why don't we help the cop get the bank robber instead of putting the cop in jail for kicking down the door? Does that make sense?
Yeah, made perfect sense. And in terms of helping the immune system to do that, are you suggesting perhaps a supplement or something along those lines, or something we are devoid of, we're missing?
Yes. So the first thing you do is, if you have any of those conditions, I mean, we kind of went off on a tangent there. I think you asked me what I did for a living. Somehow we ended up on.
No, but we were talking about methylation. So,
so
I loved it, by the way.
Yes. The first thing you do is you test for what I call the big four, which nobody tests for: mold, mycotoxin, heavy metal, parasite, virus.
What are we doing? A blood test?
You do a blood or a urine test.
Yep.
There are different tests that do this. And you see this light up. I had 3 clients just last year, that were diagnosed with Parkinson's that did not have Parkinson's disease.
Wow.
They had viral pathogens, West Nile. So what happens is you start to look at the symptomology, for example, of something like Parkinson's. And I'm not saying your audience has Parkinson's, but just as an example, you look at the symptomology of this disease, and then you look at the symptomology of West Nile. Right? A Zika mosquito infection, which I'm in Miami right now. The biggest Zika outbreak in America was in South Beach about 10, 11 years ago. The Zika mosquito carries this West Nile virus. And so what happens when you have West Nile virus attack? Well, you start to get a pill rolling tremor. What happens in Parkinson's? You get a pill rolling tremor. As it progresses, what happens? You get dysdiadochokinesias. What happens in Parkinson's? You get dysdiadochokinesias. And then what happens? You get flexor dystonia. Your flexors start to shorten. Your mood starts to crash. Your hormones go flat. These are superimposable symptoms. And when you present to the wrong doctor, they go, you have Parkinson's. And what I'm saying is we're so fast to try to categorize disease, pathology, instead of saying, could nitrogen be missing from the soil causing this leaf to? And so what vitamin, mineral, amino acid, what nutrient could be missing that's causing the expression of this condition? And, when we get back to basics and we look at where does fundamental optimal health come from? It comes from eating whole foods, supplementing for deficiency, learning to prioritize our sleep. That's our human superpower. I just did 31 days of 99% or better sleep scores.
Wow.
Yeah, and I posted my sleep scores, and I'll do this when we're in Australia. I posted my sleep scores to Instagram. I posted them to Instagram every day while I did this 11 city tour, because I was in 11 cities and in 9 days. And let me see what we got last night on my 8 sleep. Yeah, there it is. 100%.
Wow.
And the deep and REMs are there. And I don't take sleep medication. I take things like magnesium and gamma aminobutyric acid. So there are hacks to get us there. But the first thing that we need to really talk about is, what does your body need? And by specifically, I mean Mike Bouris' body need, not does everybody need. Because the biggest fallacy in all of modern medicine, supplementation, athletics, performance, is that what goes into your body and how it performs is treated exactly the same in somebody else. Nothing could be further from the truth.
So in the US, it's certainly not the case here in Australia, but so in the US, do those 4 tests exist? I mean, if you go to your doctor,
wellness test. I'll find out before I get to Australia what testing companies can do it.
Yeah.
If somebody happens to have any of those conditions, and I'm bringing my genetic test to Australia before the end of the year. I'm going through the regulatory process right now. It's brutal.
I can imagine. We're pretty tough here.
The Aussies are tough, dude. Vitamin C, guys, calm down.
They are, but we are known as one of the toughest environments in the world.
In there easier than I could get a multivitamin.
But what you're talking about is very interesting to me. So, you just mentioned earlier, and I think I may have saw it on your Instagram or on X or one of those places where you post, that recently you were in Washington with Make America Healthy Again, MAHA.
Yes.
What was your role there, and what is the issue in America? What's the problem? What's Kennedy, you, and everybody else trying to do in America?
So the issue in America is that, from a 30,000 foot view, is we have privatized profits and we have socialized the expense of healthcare. And by that, I mean the profit from the conduction of healthcare goes to private companies. The cost for administering that healthcare goes to the taxpayer, Medicaid, Medicare. We spend roughly $5 trillion a year on healthcare in the United States. We are one of the sickest, fattest, most disease-ridden nations in the world. We have the highest rates of childhood cancer that we've had in recorded history. We lead the world in 6 things: morbid obesity, type 2 diabetes, multiple chronic disease in a single biome, infant mortality, and maternal mortality.
Wow.
Which is shocking, being the highest spender on healthcare worldwide. In 1980, the rates of autism in America were 1 in 10,000. Last year, they were 1 in 32.
Whoa.
1 in 32 children has autism. And for the first time in recorded history, our life expectancy is going backwards. We're now ranked 66th in the world in life expectancy as of December 6th of last year, which means that we are ranked below some sub-Saharan South African nations that do not have clean water and sanitation. So how do we have my children's life expectancy is less than mine. So now I don't mean that emphatically because my kids are going to live forever, but because they're on this bandwagon. My daughter just got out of a cold plunge. My son's in a sauna right now. So, but you know, the generation, if we don't stop this, it could not only bankrupt our country, but you know, we are bankrupting our children's youth. We are more despondent and disconnected than ever before. We know from I know from being a mortality expert that if you want to cut a human being's life expectancy in half, and I mean in half, at any age, put them in isolation. If you take any human being and isolate them, you will cut their life expectancy in half. And isolation, sadly, happens in plain sight. I don't mean solitary confinement. If you've ever worked or know anything about the elderly, there's something called broken heart syndrome, which was very real in our life expectancy predictions. People that were married 30, 40, 50 years, 60 years, lose a spouse. 3 weeks later, they're gone. And so sense of community, sense of purpose, real human connection. We've lost our connection to Mother Nature. We have lost our connection to each other. This is not being connected, right? This is what most of us feel is our connection now. And so in America, this has gotten to a crisis standpoint. So we just released a report on Friday. I was at the White House all week. I actually did my podcast from the West Wing of the White House. It was amazing.
I saw that.
And I interviewed, some of the leading authorities. Bobby Kennedy's interview comes out on Tuesday. But Dr. Oz, head of the FDA, head of Veterans Affairs. So in short, essentially what we did was we did a very wide, clear-eyed look at chronic disease in America, childhood obesity, skyrocketing rates of cancer in our children, autism, learning disabilities, behavioral disorders. And you can't point to one thing. You can't say, it's seed oils. Oh, it's this one vaccine. But what's happened over time, because of the privatization of profits and the socialization of expenses, is we have set up a healthcare system that profits and thrives on chronic disease. We make $110 billion a year in America on type 2 diabetes alone.
Wow.
We are 4.5% of the world's population, but we consume 70% of the world's pharmaceuticals. We allow, unlike Australia, direct advertising of pharmaceutical companies to the consumer. 74% of our nutritional research is funded by big food and big pharma, which is why you have a food pyramid that says that Lucky Charms is more nutritious than grass-fed steak, right? We're that lost. So the question is, how do we undo this? Well, you get the corruption out of the nutritional research, you get the corruption out of the food supply, you get the corruption out of the stranglehold that private companies and pharma have on our public policy research. When you think that the research institutions that determine public health policy are funded by private companies, you start to understand that, wow, maybe this is not set up to serve humanity. Maybe this is set up to drive the balance sheet of certain companies. And so we started with simple things like getting petroleum-based food dyes, banning petroleum-based food dyes.
What's that? What's a petroleum-based food diet?
So petroleum-based food dyes like red dye number 3, certain dyes that are actually made from petroleum products, that are generally recognized as safe. We also started to look at our vaccine schedule. And I know this might be unpopular with a lot of people, but the definition of a vaccine, guys, is something that prevents the infection and the spread. If you had been vaccinated for polio 5 times and then you caught polio, you would be asking some questions. But we've all bought into this booster schedule, messenger RNA vaccines. There were 8 vaccines on the schedule when I was born in 1970. There are 72 vaccines on the schedule now.
Wow.
72. And some of them we vaccinate against statistically insignificant risk. So, for example, a baby is born. Within the first few days or weeks of birth, they get a hepatitis B vaccine. Well, how would you catch hepatitis B if you were an infant? Well, how is hepatitis B spread? It's spread through sexual intercourse or through intravenous drug use, sharing needles between intravenous drug users. So we know that our infants are not engaging in either of those activities. And yet we still vaccinate 100% of them for
That's crazy.
Statistical 0. We also tissue type the mother before the fetus is born. So we know if the mother's Hep B positive or not. And in that case, I could see an argument for it. And I could go through thousands of these. We test the vaccine. We don't test the delivery mechanism. So we come up with an attenuated virus. We then say, we want to put this into the body, but we want the immune system to light up like the 4th of July. We want a firestorm. We want the immune system to recognize this, fight it, create a cytokine storm. So we put these activators like aluminum, which light the immune system up like the 4th of July. And when that happens, if a child has a mild respiratory illness at the time, or just happens to be running a mild allergy to peanuts, they now have a permanent allergic reaction to that compound.
Wow.
So this is why you see skyrocketing rates of asthma. This is why you see skyrocketing rates of deadly anaphylactic risk peanut allergies. It's because we are artificially manipulating the immune system. And then we are putting in toxins and chemicals and compounds that the body does not have an enzyme to break down. We don't recognize it. It's not a metabolite, meaning the body can't take it, break it down, use it for energy, and get rid of the waste, right? And so when we use things like petroleum products, we spray millions of metric tons of glyphosate Roundup onto our crops. When we artificially spray our food supply with folic acid that 50% of the population cannot metabolize, you start to get an understanding that this says a myriad of things that are making us the sickest, fattest, most disease-ridden nation in the world. It does not mean America is not the land of opportunity. It does not mean we're not the freest, nation in the world. It does not mean that you do not have opportunity in America. What it means is that private industry has got a stranglehold on our public policy. And so what happened Friday was a watershed moment in America. I really can't emphasize that enough, because Bobby Kennedy runs now as the head of Health and Human Services. This is the largest governmental department in our country. Just by way of size, our defense budget is about $880 billion a year. The Health and Human Service budget is about $1.5 trillion a year, twice the defense budget. They employ millions of people. But that's one area of government. If they want to get to the soil, you need the Department of Agriculture. If you want to open lanes in the regulatory environment, you need the Food and Drug Administration. If you want to help the veterans, you need the Veterans Administration. If you want to get into the public school, you need the Department of Education. And for the first time in our nation's history, nearly every major head of every governmental department is completely signed on board to make America healthy again and to address this problem and to address it quickly. Not with 3-year, 5-year, 10-year phase-out programs, weeks to stop this and replace it with something different. We're going to stop subsidizing crops, monoagriculture crops that are high glyphosate, high GMO crops. In Russia, it's actually a crime to grow GMO foods. Putin will put you in prison for growing genetically modified food because they know. And a lot of European nations, Australia is pretty decent at this, don't allow a lot of these compounds into the food supply without rigorous testing. I know how brutal it is trying to get a supplement into your country. Trust me.
Well, just on that, because that's very interesting. You say that about seed oils, and recently I put a podcast out in Australia about the importance of olive oil, how olive oil is quite a superior oil relative to everything else. But what just elucidate a little bit more about seed oils, because what probably most people don't realize is seed oils are used in just about every single place we go to, a restaurant, cafe, in the foods we buy at the shops. Just let's talk about seed oils for a moment. Just open it up a little bit for me, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Like a lot of things, very often it's not the food, it's the distance from the food to the table. So what I mean by that is, if you take a canola plant, also called a rapeseed, sounds a lot better to call it a canola plant than a rapeseed, and you put it in a commercial press, okay, and it comes out gummy. You then degum it with hexane, which is a powerful neurotoxin. And now you have a degummed neurotoxic oil. So you then heat that oil to 405 degrees, which turns it rancid. So now you have a putrefied, degummed neurotoxic oil that's now rancid.
But still an oil nonetheless. That's the whole point for them. Yeah.
Completely denatured because it has a low smoke point. So it's a rancid oil. So now you need to deodorize it. So you deodorize it with something called sodium hydroxide, one of the most powerful carcinogens known to man. And then eventually you bleach it and bottle it and then put it on the shelf. Now, if this was on the shelf in America, the American Heart Association would put a heart healthy label on it, with a little cute little heart flexing its muscles. And so what you've done is it's the industrial processing of a lot of these things. And they say, well, it's just a little bit of hexane and it's a little bit of sodium hydroxide. And it's just less chlorine than you would get in a glass of tap water. But then you go to serving sizes and you go, when I look at the back of my creamer and it says that it has 10 grams of sugar, that's not bad. That's in a tablespoon. Most of us put a quarter of a cup in our coffee. Okay, so now I need to multiply that by 8 or 10. So what happens with seed oils is these are rancid, putrefied oils. So when they get into the body, they cause oxidation. Oxidation is like rust. And remember, the process of oxidation and free radical damage is the genesis of a lot of disease. We have been blaming cholesterol for decades for crimes that it does not commit. Cholesterol is probably the most maligned and misunderstood compound in the entire human body. Cholesterol, by the way, the majority of it is made by your liver. Only 15% of your cholesterol comes from diet. So by stripping 100% of the cholesterol out of your diet, you might move your cholesterol number 15 points. If you want to shift your cholesterol number, you shift what you put into the front door of the liver, so it puts better cholesterol ratios out the back door. But if we talk for a second about what cholesterol is and what it's not, first of all, cholesterol is not a fuel source. Okay, you cannot use cholesterol for energy. So what is it? It's a construction material. And we use it to build every cell wall, every cell membrane, every hormone in the human body. We make the single most important nutrient in the human body, I would argue, vitamin D3, from cholesterol. Right? We make it from sunlight and cholesterol. In fact, human beings only make one vitamin. If I was to pull your blood, there would be hundreds of vitamins in your bloodstream. You are only capable of making one, vitamin D3. And you don't need to eat or drink or do anything but expose your skin to sunlight and have cholesterol in your blood to make that nutrient. It acts like a vitamin in some cases, a hormone in other cases, a calcium transport molecule in other cases. It's probably, if I was to pick one, the single most important compound in the human body.
Well, why are we suppressing the liver from making it then by taking statins?
Because it's a very profitable industry, second only to vaccination. Statins is $1 trillion win. Why? Because statins, you're on a statin for life. When you look at the extension of life in the best meta-analyses, it was 4 days over a lifetime. But what we don't do is, we have a tendency in medicine and even in research to study things in silos, right? And we study things in a lab. So we take a cell from the human body, we put it in a laboratory, we look at how it behaves, and we assume that when we put it back into the human body, it's going to behave the same way. Nothing could be further from the truth. Cells are like human beings. They behave in communities. And that community, there's a lot going on. The serum of the blood, the cytoplasm of the cell. There's electrical charges, there's frequencies, there's vitamins, minerals, amino acids, nutrients. It's a community. So when you get very myopic and you say, okay, when LDL cholesterol goes up, heart disease goes up. So let's push cholesterol down to bring heart disease down. But you don't look at the consequences of what happens when I collapse this vital construction material. Well, if it's used to make cell walls, cell membranes, hormones, and vitamin D3, you can kiss all of those things goodbye, right? You can also suppress those. What are the downstream consequences of hormone imbalance? Low vitamin D3, poor cell wall manufacture, and poor cell membranes. There are all kinds of consequences. So we don't see this ballooning consequence that we're creating. It's like getting a flat tire and getting out of your car and slashing your other 3 tires just to make equilibrium, right? Now you have 4 problems. You only had 1 to begin with. And so if what's really fascinating to me is that as I meet with literally the leading pioneers in anti-aging, biohacking, longevity, the PhDs, the MDs, the researchers, the MDs that are really shifting the needle, we're coming full circle. We're getting back to the basics. We're actually realizing that, you know what? You can't diet your way around poor sleep. You can't eat your way around that. You can't exercise your way out of a poor diet. And you cannot sit your way to a healthy body. And so there are some of these basics that are must-haves in longevity. They're proven in longevity research. They're proven in the blue zones. And that's where you start. Because I think, of the hundreds of thousands of clients and patients that have come through my clinic system, I started the Ultimate Human platform, this one, because years ago I had this epiphany and I was like, what's amazing is every single person, almost without exception, that came through our clinic system, and we saw close to 200,000 patients before I exited that. Every single patient, whether they were 18 years old or 80 years old, they were male or female, no matter what was wrong with them, they always asked the same question. They always said, where do I start? Right? But how do I start this journey? Because I've been online and I got complete paralysis of analysis. And the reason why I started the Ultimate Human platform was to just message, to give without the expectation of receipt. Like, I'm not being paid to be on your podcast, and we don't have any financial arrangement. And I don't care, because I want this message to get out. And I wanted to answer that question, where do you start? Right? And then how do you go from there? And you start by developing the habits of somebody who is intending to live a long time. If you intend to lose weight and you don't develop the habits of somebody who is losing weight, nothing else matters, right? All the goals and priorities and mind tricks in the world don't matter. We are not a collection of our goals. We are a collection of our habits. And nothing is more true when we talk about human longevity and human performance. And so to answer that question, you start by testing for deficiency. You first supplement for deficiency, not the sake of supplementing. And then you start to build a plan that might include all of the exotic things: stem cells, exosomes, red light therapy, cold plunging, regular sauna, some of the what I would call more exotics. But without the basics, nothing else matters. If your body is deficient in methylfolate and you don't supplement with methylfolate, your gut issues are going to permeate the balance of your lifetime. They'll never handle it.
Let's assuming for a moment that we find out what we're deficient in by doing the testing at the beginning. Let's just look at a few of the ones that, let's call them constraints, things that you should not do. For example, processed food. I don't know, a hamburger. How do we look at the things that we shouldn't do? Alcohol. Obviously, cigarettes is an obvious one, but alcohol, let's see, and I'm not saying being an alcoholic. I'm just saying, 3 beers on a Saturday night at the footy, or 6 beers on a Sunday afternoon. what are the constraint things? What are some of the constraints, hacks that we should be looking at? And I just gave some examples, but maybe you could open that up a little bit for me.
A really good way is, start understanding how to read food labels. And by understanding how to read a food label, you don't need to know what polysorbate 80 is and monosodium glutamate is. All you need to do is pick up anything in the grocery store and spin it around and read the label and just ask yourself, do I know where to find this in this grocery store? So if it says rice, yep, I know where I can find that. If it says cane sugar, yep, I can find that. If it says polysorbate 80, what aisle is that in? If it says high fructose corn syrup, where would I find that? If it says red dye number 40, red dye 30, artificial flavor, it's not located anywhere in that grocery store because it's not a consumable. It's not an ingredient. It is a chemical. So that's the fastest way to get to learn to read food labels is if you read something on the back of a label that you wouldn't be able to walk around the grocery store and find, and you don't recognize where I could get it. When it says onion powder, I could probably go find that. So that's a very easy way to begin to read food labels and start to get yourself towards a whole food diet, shopping the perimeter of the grocery store, being cautious about the aisles. That's the first, place to start. You don't need to become a citizen scientist and be able to read every chemical or synthetic, that's on a label. The second thing is, this is why, you don't need to really count calories and count macros. Our ancestors didn't know calories and fat grams and the blue zones, you won't find a single centenarian that could tell you how many carbohydrates they had that day or how many grams of protein or how much saturated fat versus trans fat. What they did was they ate till they were satiated because we actually, we have this whole revolution of GLP-1s, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro. All a GLP-1 is a hormone that you make in your gut. Glucose-like polypeptide is a hormone we make in our gut. And how do we make it? We make it in response to satiation. How do we get satiated? We eat nutrient-dense foods. If I put 4 boxes of Oreo cookies in front of you, you could chew your way through all 4 of those boxes. If I put 6 avocados in front of you, I promise you could not eat 6 avocados because the nutrient density is so high that your satiation response would be so strong you would start to feel sick if you kept eating.
So my stomach tells me.
Yeah. Your stomach kills you?
My stomach, what you're saying is my stomach will tell me by saying, Mark, you've had
Yeah.
enough.
It would just be, you will be so satiated, your gag reflex will kick in, right? And this is how human beings were meant to eat, not count macros and micros and try to figure out if something is gluten-free and non-GMO and vegan and vegetarian and dairy-free. We were meant to eat whole foods. And so the other thing that I would do is I would draw intention to your sleep. All right. And I'm going to teach this when I come to Australia in 3 weeks, but I would actually bring attention to your sleep. Sleep, I would argue, is the most bullied thing in our schedule. It's like the stepchild of our day, right? If you ask most people, when do you go to sleep? They'll say, when, I'm done getting all my stuff done, when I'm done my work or done with the kids or done with this or that. Well, what's your morning routine? They'll tell you what that is. What's your exercise routine? They'll tell you what that is. What's your routine at work? They'll tell you what that is. But if you say, what's your sleep routine? No idea, right? I don't have a routine to go to sleep. As soon as I hear somebody say that, that's the first thing I fix. Because by drawing attention to your human superpower, which is sleep, you can completely change the trajectory of your life. All right. Why? Well, why is sleep so important? A lot of people, we know that sleep is important, but we don't know why, right? In the body, we have a system that drains poisons and toxins and gets them out of the body. It's called the lymphatic system. It's a static system. It does not have the pressure of the heart behind it. It moves fluid by mobility, which is why things like Tai Chi, walking are amazing for you. And because it moves the lymph and it gets the waste out of your body. But there's another system in the brain called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system is the waste elimination system for the brain. It's the only way that the brain repairs, detoxifies, eliminates waste, divides, regenerates. And this system is active during deep sleep. So if you're not getting deep sleep, you're not getting toxicity out of the brain, which causes inflammation. If you're not getting REM sleep, you are not assembling conscious thought into memory. We learn things during the day, which stays here, and then we store them at night, which goes back here. And so into the what's called the hypothalamus from the prefrontal cortex. So when we get good sleep, we assemble strong memory. We have a learning capacity. When we get deep sleep, we actually eliminate waste and detoxify our brain, which is why you feel so amazing after you get 7 or 8 hours of really good sleep. Brain fog is another name for neural inflammation, right? So people walk around with brain fog all the time, not realizing how easy it is to fix.
So can I just get on to talk about this, because that's a big issue for me, or one that I've been concentrating on. I think what you're sort of saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying is you actually need to have a strategy around how you're going to go to sleep at night and how well you sleep for the night, and you also probably need to measure it. Because when you show me your screen there from your 8 sleep, I didn't quite get a chance to look at it, but how many hours would you say of an 8-hour period? I don't want to know percentages, but are we talking about like in aggregate every night you're trying to get out of if you've got a really good sleep efficiency, are you trying to get like 3 hours of both REM and deep sleep in that 8-hour period? What are we talking about here?
So I got, last night was 100% sleep score. I got 7 hours and 28 minutes of sleep.
Yep.
My deep sleep was 1 hour and 32 minutes. My REM sleep was 1 hour and 35 minutes.
So about 3 hours altogether.
Yeah. 3 hours total.
Yeah. So because you need to be able to measure these things. I mean, it's good to have a strategy, but if you need to be able to somehow measure it so you can sort of know exactly how you're performing.
Or a Ring, a Whoop, an 8 sleep mattress.
Yep.
Those are all great ways to do it. I mean, what you can track when measure, you can fix. What you will see, if you brought up alcohol, is 100% of the time that you drink before bed, it interrupts your sleep score.
1 drink and 2 drinks? What are we talking about? Any amount?
About 2 ounces of alcohol within 2 hours of bedtime. And that's for a number of reasons, because it's not the alcohol. It's what the alcohol becomes. Alcohol gets converted into something by the liver called acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde is not only a poison, your body can handle it, but it's a poison. But it also drops the pH of the blood. The pH range of your blood is very narrow. It's about 0.5 point. We know that as you move towards the alkaline end of the spectrum, you are in a disease-free state. As you move towards the acidic end of the spectrum, you're in a disease-prone state. Does that mean every time you're acidic, you're diseased? No. It doesn't mean every time you're alkaline, you're healthy. But the point is that the more that we can stay towards the upper end of that scale, the healthier we are, the better our body functions, the less inflammation, the less oxidative stress we're under, the less free radical damage going on. And so when you drink and it converts into acetaldehyde drops the pH of the blood, makes you more acidic, and is a poison that your liver and other organs in your body, your brain, have to process. And so alcohol also converts to sugar while we sleep. So people have a couple glasses of wine to go to sleep because it's first will make you sleepy, but then it starts to wake you up. Why? Because as you process the alcohol, your blood sugar starts to rise. So it's almost like having a candy bar in your sleep. And so now your glucose is rising, which puts you in a awakened state. Your pH of your blood is falling, which makes you foggy and irritable and gives you a headache. So, at least during the weekdays, prioritizing your sleep and actually just drawing attention to it. A lot of times you'll find that if you really examined your day, you're doing a bunch of nonsense in the 60 to 90 minutes leading up to sleep. You're scrolling through Instagram, you're watching a show that you really don't even need to watch. You're just sort of barely entertaining yourself. And you could be donating that time to your temple. I really feel like we should look at our bodies as a temple. And we should say, I'm only going to let things in that serve me. I'm not going to let thieves into the temple. I don't care how pretty a suit you have on. And I'm going to do things that are in service to my temple. I'm going to put clean water, clean air, clean food. I'm going to treat it well. I mean, I'm going to build this sort of imaginary fence around myself, and I'm going to buffer things that are trying to get into the temple, which includes a lot of relationships that we have. And just adopting this mentality and not changing your whole life overnight will set you on a trajectory to be the most ultimate human version of yourself.
Recently, was in February this year, I interviewed Dana White when he was over here for the UFC, and great guy, really interesting, full of energy, and gave it to our media here pretty hard, which is pretty funny. Like he doesn't hold back. But he said something to me in the interview, Gary Brecka changed my life. And of course, we were there to talk about the UFC, so I didn't go on about it. I didn't inquire any more about it. But without breaching confidentiality, etc., what are the sort of things that he might be talking about here? Because I did see you did at one stage a fasting program, but I think went for 80 hours or 80 hours or at least 4 or 5 days. But what would you be typically do for not Dana, but typically do for someone who might have Dana's symptoms when he walks in to see you?
Well, I mean, Dana, we can actually talk about quite extensively. I mean, Dana's put his labs out onto Instagram. We actually did a side-by-side interview where we actually put his blood work right on Instagram. I figure if you show your blood work to 12 million people, you've lost that HIPAA privilege.
Totally.
And he's also been very forthcoming with the journey. In fact, where's Dana? Up there somewhere. There he is. I don't know if you can see him.
I can see him.
There he is, right there. And so in any case, what happened with Dana was very typical for a lot of people. He had slowly started to put on weight over a prolonged period of time. He was probably 48, 50 pounds overweight. He was managing his blood pressure with 3 blood pressure medications, a beta blocker, calcium channel blocker, and a diuretic. He was managing tinnitus symptoms with neural inhibitory medication. He was actually managing sleep apnea with a sleep CPAP machine. And he thought that was perfectly normal because he had the best doctors in the world. And so what I did was I did this test on him, and I found out that his body could not convert homocysteine into methionine. Now, this doesn't, again, sound like a big deal. But everybody listening to this podcast right now has an amino acid in your blood called homocysteine. You will inherit from your ancestor your homocysteine processing ability. So homocysteine methylation you inherited from your parents. So if one of your parents has high blood pressure and the other one has, let's say, hypothyroid, you will inherit the deficiencies that eventually lead to those conditions. They didn't pass you on a hypertension gene. They didn't pass you on a hypothyroid gene, even though that's what Dana had been told. So Dana was hypertensive. He had very high blood pressure. And it got to the point where they couldn't manage it with medication. So they were actually thinking about surgery, something called a heart ablation. They were also going to do a surgery to widen the back of his throat, take out his adenoids. And so I told Dana, I said, look, I pulled 10 years of medical records on you, Dana. You've never had a normal heart exam. You've always had an abnormal EKG, a normal EEG, normal heart sounds, normal lung sounds, normal contrast studies. There's nothing wrong with your heart. You have on your labs, and I showed it to him, you have very high, one of the highest levels of homocysteine I've ever had. What you inherited was not heart disease. What you inherited was the inability to process this amino acid. And so as homocysteine rises, and it's cruising by the inside lining of your artery, it irritates the artery. And if you irritate an artery, it will clamp down. And if you make the pipes smaller in a fixed system,
heart has to work harder.
You have 63,000 miles of blood vessel in your body.
Wow.
63,000. So it doesn't take much arterial narrowing to drive the pressure up, right? So what if we could get those arteries to relax? What do you think would happen to the pressure? So I put them on a very simple amino acid called TMG, trimethylglycine. And what this amino acid did was it made up for the deficiency that he had, so he could start to process and bring down the homocysteine. And as his homocysteine level began to fall over the next 21 weeks, as it began to fall back into the normal range, his arterial system began to relax. As his arterial system relaxed, his pressure returned to normal. Till eventually his cardiologist, not me, because I'm not licensed to practice medicine, his cardiologist took him off of all 3 of his cardiac medications.
Wow.
And so he is medication free now. He's lost 48 pounds. I also found that he had very high triglycerides, which is a measure of blood fat in the blood. And triglycerides is a true measure for heart and cardiovascular risk. So his triglycerides were so high, they were over 800 fasted, which means that he almost had more fat in his blood than blood.
Whoa.
In fact, I'll never forget my daughter, who's a nurse, drew his blood. And when she drew his blood, we were in his office. And what you do is you draw the blood and then you let it sit for 30 minutes and then you put it into a centrifuge and you spin it and then you take it to the lab. So she drew the blood and it was sitting on the table. And while Dana was facing me, she was behind Dana and she was holding up the blood going, "Oh my God, Dad, look at this." And she was turning the blood over and it was just stuck in the tube. It had hardened in the tube. Dana's told this story, so I'm not disclosing anything that he wouldn't appreciate me disclosing. So it was a difficult conversation to convince Dana that for 10 weeks, I was going to put him on a very high fat diet to get rid of the fat in his blood. I was going to put him into a state of ketosis, what's called a 10-week keto reset, and instead of having his body use glucose as a primary fuel source, he was going to use beta hydroxybutyrate, a ketone body, a fat, as a fuel source. And the first place the body will eat the fat is right out of the bloodstream. And so over the next few weeks, his triglycerides fell from 800 to 130, which is below the normal end of the range. Here it's about 149 milligrams per deciliter. So during that time, his weight plummeted. So his weight began to plummet. His brain fog cleared. The inflammation started to leave his body, including his nasopharynx, his sinus, his nasal passages, the back of his throat. He actually, for the first time, went to bed without the CPAP machine and slept the full 8 hours. Called me the next day and was like, "Dude, I forgot to put this thing on. Normally I would wake up 10 times during the night. I hate this thing. It's pushing air into my nose and my mouth at night," because the inflammation had gone. And so now I'm proud to say that he is not on any medication. And he's thriving. His blood numbers are the best they've ever been. His liver enzymes are perfectly normal. He's down 48 pounds. He feels like a 25-year-old. He talks about it all the time. So now he's on that journey to see how far can I take it. That's when we brought in red light therapy, PEMF, what's called EWAT, exercise with oxygen therapy. That's when we started doing things like exosomes and natural killer cell treatments. Those call them luxury items. And it extended his life expectancy by 37 years.
One of the things I did
24 years for 37 years.
I don't know if I saw it on your page or his, but he talked about with you. He talked about going on a fast, and I think it was like it was a few days anyway. Can I just ask you about fasting?
Sure.
I sometimes I thought about doing it, but I thought, wait a minute, do I need guidance on this? Do I, like if let's say I decide not to eat, just drink water for 2 days, 48 hours, can I still go for a jog? Can I go for or should I just walk? Can I go to the gym? Should I just sit down and watch television or something? What do you do in these processes? I mean, he had you, obviously, but what does a normal person, ordinary person do if they decide that they're going to just not eat food for a couple of days? And perhaps could you also explain, because I saw you put something up on X yesterday, I think it was, about there's 2 stages to it, to the fasting, and I think the second stage was elimination was one of the words you used in there. So what are the benefits of fasting? What is the period which we should fast, and what are the sort of protocols that we should adopt?
So I would say if you're new to fasting, the easiest way to start fasting is a single day fast. And here's a couple of tricks. Don't ever go an entire day without eating if you're new to fasting. What you do is you fast for 24 hours. So you eat your last meal, let's say at 6 o'clock on Saturday night. and you eat your first meal at 6 o'clock on Sunday night. So you're done eating on Saturday at 6 p.m. and you start eating at dinner at 6 p.m. The reason for that is because you're going to eat at 6 o'clock Saturday night and you're going to go to bed and everything's going to be fine. You're going to wake up hungry and you'll learn to deal with that. But if you know that at 6 o'clock tonight, I'm going to get something to eat. When noon you're hungry, at 2 o'clock you're starving, you're like, okay, I can make it 4 more hours. I can make it 3 more hours. And you will make it to that meal. The reason why I start people on that type of fasting, which is called cyclical fasting, is because you learn to get through that first 24-hour period. You're like, I can actually do this. The next thing you want to do is you want to progress to a 3-day fast. The way that I do 3-day fasting is day 1, you take something called perfect amino. You take something called MAHA gold sea salt, which has all 90 plus trace minerals in it. I also use hydrogen tablets, magnesium tablets that effervesce into pure hydrogen gas. And you have a bowl of bone broth at noon, and you have a bowl of bone broth at 6 p.m., day 1. Day 2, you're going to be on water just for day 2 and day 3. And all you're on are water and mineral salts. You don't want to become mineral or electrolyte deficient. And Baja Gold salt is the one that I use. You could use a Celtic salt or any other kind of mineral salt. And so for the next 2 days, you are on mineral salts. You want to hydrate and mineralize the body. And what will happen is, first of all, fasting has been around for eons, for centuries. Every major religion in the world fasts. Yeah. The Buddhists, the Jews,
Islamic,
the Muslims, the Christians, the Catholics. I mean, every major religion has fasted for centuries. And there's a reason for that, because we used it to treat chronic disease. We also used it to bring us closer to God. It actually cleared our minds because it cleansed our bodies. And so it's not a religious thing. I mean, it's a healthy thing. But when you deprive the body of what it needs for a short period of time, what it will do is it will begin, because if the body says we don't have any amino acids, we don't have any nutrients, we have no vitamins, we have no minerals, where am I going to get those? It will begin to eat you from your weakest, most useful part forward. And the weakest link in a human being is something called a senescent cell, which is a cell that is living, but it's lost its function. These are essentially dead cells, but they're still alive. So it's a red blood cell that can't carry oxygen anymore. It's a white blood cell that can no longer mount an immune defense. It's a platelet that can't carry growth factors. It's like having a company full of lazy employees. Imagine if you had a company full of 100 employees and 30 of them weren't doing a damn thing. You could send somebody in to eat them and put a perfectly functioning employee in their place. This is kind of how the body eats senescent cells, right? From the weakest forward. And the body is just so incredibly intelligent and efficient, not to get religious on you, but the more I study human physiology, the more I believe in God. And, this didn't happen, in my opinion, by accident. So what happens is, you have these useless cells, and the immune system will break those apart and use them for energy. It will take the amino acids and nutrients from these cells and feed it to the rest of the body. So you clean the body out of senescent cells. As the fast goes on, you have no more glucose. You have no stored energy, no glycogen. So now you have to go to your fat reserves, and you have to actually start to tap fat. So you go into ketosis.
When does that start, Gary? At what point? Like, is that after the second day or the first day?
It starts after about hour 18.
Right.
So it actually starts on the first day. And so now you're in ketosis. You're using fat as an energy source. And there's a whole host of benefits from that. The keto diet was originally designed to treat epilepsy. Every human being on the surface of the earth entered this world on a ketogenic diet. Even if you got breast milk, the first 48 hours of breast milk, called colostrum, is almost entirely ketogenic. It's easy to survive on a keto diet. So now you're in ketosis. You're using beta hydroxybutyrate as a fuel source. You feel clean. The inflammation is beginning to drop. Then by day 3, your pituitary gland starts to secrete very high amounts of growth hormone, the repair hormone, the healing and repair hormone that goes everywhere in your body and starts to heal damaged tissue. I've seen cases of leaky gut resolved in a 5-day fast. the oncology research now on fasting in oncology is mind-numbing with the accelerated rates of cancer recovery. I'm not saying you fast the entire time you're on cancer. Those need to be controlled fast. But when you go into a fasted state, all of the useless junk that your liver has been processing can now be eliminated. Your liver is not bothered with the day-to-day tasks of taking care of all the garbage you're throwing at it, and it can just eliminate waste and repair and detoxify. Ditto that for your kidneys, for your pancreas, for your lungs, for your skin, for your brain. All of these organ systems have waste elimination pathways, but they are so busy with all the garbage that we throw at them on a daily basis that we really don't have time to cleanse ourselves. And so the body goes through a natural cleansing process, and it is extraordinarily good for you. The benefits are astounding. About once every 4 months, I have a free challenge. Any of your folks can go to theultimatehuman.com. Just sign up for my free challenges. They're completely free. They're usually 3 days long, and I stay with you 2 hours every day for 3 days, and I will walk you through, in some cases, cold plunging, water fasting, whole food dieting. This June 22nd, 23rd, 24th, I have right before I leave for Australia, or 23rd, 24th, and 25th. I'm actually moving my challenge. I'm physically going to be in LA because I go right from my challenge to the plane and fly to see you guys. So if they hear this podcast before then, sign up for that challenge. It's a detox challenge.
They definitely will hear it. And that's at theultimatehuman.com.
Just theultimatehuman.com.
Yeah, okay.
Just sign up for the challenge. It's going to be about how do you find mold, mycotoxin, metals, parasites, and how do you get rid of them? What are the natural things that you can do to really help your body eliminate waste, activated charcoal, saunas, things like that.
So, and this fasting process, I mean, we hear about people doing intermittent fasting every day, but is the fasting process you're talking about, is this like a quarterly thing you do every year, or I mean, how often?
Every 4 months.
Every 4
3
months.
days.
Yeah.
4 months. Yep. 3 times a year.
3 times a year. And because when you showed a photograph of Dana after it, my God, he looked amazing. Like he was ripped.
Right. Your skin clears up. The whites of your eyes are the brightest they've been. Your brain is on fire. You feel like you took a limitless pill.
Yeah, as in the movie. And in terms of exercise, in terms of the protocols, exercise, what do? You don't exercise? Is it advisable not to exercise, or you just do light exercise? What's the deal?
Light exercise, right? Things, walking, very light weight training, yoga, Tai Chi, stretching. Be good to your body. Swimming, maybe a light bike ride. Don't pound your body on those days, right? Don't create a lot more free radical oxidative stress. And I don't care how good a condition you're in, you can take 3 days off. Trust me.
100%. And then just you did mention saunas, etc. If I could just touch on this, because these are sort of hacks that Australians love. And Australians do love a hack. Can you just touch on saunas, just generally, not necessarily during the fasting process, but saunas generally? I mean, I have an infrared sauna. Is infrared the right one? Is it steam the right one? Is the dry sauna the better one? Should I do it for every day of the week? Take me through that one.
Yeah. So here's where all of the research is on saunas. The more frequent the sauna, the better the benefit. So the benefits seem to be very high and very sustainable at 3 times a week. 20 minutes a session, 160 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is Celsius, but make that conversion. And where we have all of the data, literally centuries of data, is on dry sauna. I'm not opposed to infrared saunas. I actually have an infrared sauna, but dry saunas are widely available. They're easy to access. They're relatively cheap if you want to get one for your home, meaning you can get sauna blankets. And what happens when we sweat that most people don't realize is that the liver uses the skin as a secondary route of waste elimination. So you can actually eliminate waste through the skin. Remember, we have 2 types of sweating. We have passive and active sweating. Passive sweating is where if you got up from your chair right now and you went for a brisk walk, your body would begin to sweat to lower your body temperature. But if you've ever had the flu and you've been in a cold room and you're freezing and you're sweating, why are you sweating while you're cold? Well, that is active sweating. That is your liver accessing the skin as a secondary route of waste elimination. That's what happens when you get into a sauna. And so making detox a part of your lifestyle instead of something you do occasionally, like a juice cleanse or something like that, is a much, much better way to address, longevity.
So just that elimination process, which is interesting. Most people, they wake up in the morning and they go to the bathroom, and there's a period there between let's say wake time and maybe 10 a.m. in the morning, where it just seemed, I'm probably giving you a survey one here, where it just seems to be an elimination period. During that, you take a pee, your pee's yellow, then you drink some more water, it starts to clear. What are some of the things we should be trying to do when we first wake up in the morning? So, like, a lot of people I know go straight to the coffee machine and rip a coffee in.
60 to 90 minutes if you can, because you actually want adenosine competing for caffeine. So you want to actually allow the adenosine to bind, and you want the caffeine to be more effective and avoid the afternoon crash. So if you actually can delay your coffee 60 to 90 minutes, there's a lot of sound research that shows that it's tremendously more beneficial. I'll tell you exactly what I do. I wake up, I go in and brush my teeth. I tongue scrape, floss, and then I do something called oil pulling, which is just I take a little scoop of organic coconut oil, and I put it in my mouth and I swish it around. You're supposed to do it for a prolonged period of time. I do it for 2 or 3 minutes, and I spit it in the trash can. And then I go in the other room and I take a few really, really, really deep breaths, and I get right into cold plunge.
Wow. Cold plunge first thing in the morning, summer, winter.
Right. Summer, winter, year round. I have a pathway in my house, and I force myself to do it. So I earn my way to the coffee maker. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but the next phase is really important. Probably my favorite biohack is a sea salt called MAHA Gold, like a $10 bag. Of this thing will last you probably 5 years. And it has all 91 of the trace minerals that we need. And so many of us are mineral deficient. We don't realize the power of minerals. And we take an electrolyte, but electrolyte mixes are usually the big three because consumers recognize those: potassium, magnesium, and sodium. There are 91 other minerals that you need: magnesium, molybdenum, silica, boron, zinc, manganese. There's so many different minerals that we need, and you can get them naturally from a mineral salt. So I take an 8 or 10 ounce glass of water. I actually squirt MAHA Gold sea salt. It comes in a liquid form. I throw 2 hydrogen tablets in there. They're called H2 tabs. They're elemental magnesium that when you drop them in water, turn into pure hydrogen gas. And I put a scoop of something called perfect aminos, which does not break a fast. It's equivalent to 29 grams of protein, and it has all 9 of the essential amino acids. And I mix that up and I whack it back. I hydrate, mineralize, reduce my inflammation, and I give my body the amino acids that it needs to do its job.
This is like maybe 20, 30 minutes up. This would be straight after your ice bath or your cold plunge.
I'm awake, 15, 20 minutes after I'm awake.
And how long does someone like Gary Brecka stay in the cold plunge? What are you talking about? What sort of temperature are we talking about?
3 minutes minimum, 6 minutes maximum.
Three minutes?
There is no evidence that colder is better or longer is better.
Right. So cold, when you say cold, we're talking about what, 8 degrees Celsius? What would you do?
48 to 52 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, so that's add 14, 22. That's about right. So that's about 10 degrees. So that's about 10 degrees. Yeah, so that's
no evidence that colder is better. Why? Because once you get a peripheral vasoconstriction, as you get colder, you don't get a stronger vasoconstriction. Once you activate brown fat, you don't get a higher activation by making it colder. Once you have a release of cold shock proteins, colder temperatures do not release more proteins. Once you have dopamine activation and a flood of dopamine into your brain, you don't have a higher dopaminergic response because you've lowered the temperature. So you want the minimum dose for the maximum output. And at 6 minutes, from nearly all the studies that I've read, it appears to trail off almost to zero. So if you're staying in longer than 6 minutes, it's just a man thing. And if you're going much colder, that's also a man thing or a personal preference, but you do not need to torture yourself. Remember, we're trying to cold shock the body, not cold adapt the body.
Yeah, and so, but do you actually get in a warm shower after it? I mean, once you've done that, I mean, because let's say it's the middle of winter, I've tried it. I mean, sometimes I feel like I stay cold.
Yeah, stay cold, and then do your morning routine, and then take a warm shower before you go off to the office.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay. So, and then since we're talking about Gary Brecka's program, when do you start to do your exercise? When is your training routine?
So then I'll get out of the cold plunge. I'll go down. I'll make that cocktail that I told you about, and then I go straight outside and I do breath work. I go right out on my balcony. I face the sun. I expose my skin to sunlight. For about 8 to 12 minutes. And I sit there and I just do 3 rounds of 30 obnoxiously deep breaths with a breath hold in between. And I look out in the direction of the sun, not at the sun, look out in the direction of the sun. And I'm just still for a few minutes. And I'll lightly stretch sometimes during that. I'm sitting Indian style, just lightly stretch. I'm not really pushing my body. I'm just hydrating, mineralizing, putting oxygen in my body, and light, which I'll go over when I come to Australia. I'll give you all the details, but it is astounding how good sunlight is for you first thing in the morning. Regulating your cortisol receptors, regulating your melatonin receptors, resetting your circadian clock. We are creatures of habit. We are circadian biological creatures. We are so out of tune with the circadian cycle of the earth. That getting back in tune with that is very healthy for you. In fact, Whoop did a study and concluded that morning sunlight and consistent bedtimes were the 2 biggest things that determine sleep quality.
And just on the 30 breaths, I try that too, and sometimes I get a bit dizzy. Is that an issue?
That's the oxygen tension changing in your tissues. That's a very good sign.
That's a good sign. Mm-hmm. I should be looking for that, because
that's why you shouldn't be driving or standing up or in the shower. You should be seated in a safe place, on a couch, on a chair. And if you get really dizzy, then slow down or stop. Yeah. But that is the oxygen tension changing in your tissues.
Okay, so I'm looking at you, and you're pretty packed. You're looking pretty fine there. You're looking good, dude. So
you're good.
Yeah. So what and because obviously sleep, nutrition, which is what your first thing you're doing in the morning, but you've had a good sleep, you good nutrition, like with the mineralization.
Yeah, and then I'll go down stairs or into the gym and weight train.
So what are we talking about here? So because I often listen to Peter Attia, and I listen to Andrew Huberman and yourself. And I think to myself, sometimes I don't have enough hours in the day to get all this stuff done.
That routine that I just told you, I'm 20 minutes into my day.
So what about training though? Because they tend to train. Look, it seems to me like Peter Attia trains like for 3 hours a day or something. I don't know, but it's because like if I do aerobic, I do some mobility stuff. I'm a wrestler, so I love to do my jiu-jitsu 3 times a week, and then on top of that, I do some weight training. I think, wow, yes. I don't, and then I go for, then I do 150 minutes of, zone 2. I'm running out of time, dude. Tell me about it.
No. So if you're weight training and don't think that you can get a cardiovascular workout by weight training, you're not weight training properly, right? I mean, you can keep a pace with weight training, a safe pace between sets that allows you to get your heart rate up and to also tear and challenge your muscles to cause the hypertrophy and the hypertrophic and the hyperplastic response. The truth is, if you want to live a long time, you need to lift heavy weight. And by heavy weight, I don't mean compound lifts, back squats, heavy bench press, but you need to challenge your body. Dumbbells, barbells, cable workouts, even body weight exercises, taken close to a rep of failure, not all the way to failure, but taken close to that. Because by challenging and strengthening the body, you're tapping what's called the hormetic response, and it will strengthen in response. Muscle is our metabolic currency, and meaning that muscle is a sponge for glucose. It holds our skeletal system erect. It actually makes hormones. It produces things called endorphins. So frailty is one of the greatest risks to longevity. There's something called sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle wasting, which occurs in the latter stages. It actually occurs in the earlier stages of life, 40s, 50s, 60s. And so we want to fight sarcopenia. So we want to challenge our body. So I would say weight training a minimum of 3 days a week. And if you love jujitsu, you should do jujitsu. If you love to cycle, you should cycle. If you love Pilates, you should do Pilates. You should find what you like. Like, you shouldn't not want to exercise. But weight training, minimum 3 days a week is a must.
And I got one more question. And I hope you don't mind. This is one more question. And you've been extraordinarily generous with your time. I saw you with a headset on yesterday. I think it was yesterday. I don't know how it came up my feed anyway. And this headset, you can adjust for all sorts of sensations. For example, you can adjust for the sensation of having coffee without having coffee, or you can adjust for the sensation of having alcohol without having alcohol. Can you give us a little bit of just tell me a little bit about this one?
It's pretty wild. It's called a Hapbee, Hapbee. I thought it was complete nonsense when I first heard about it. And then I met the neuroscientist and the physicist that developed the technology for DARPA, which is our
defense
weapons program, defense program here for the military. And essentially what they did was they isolated the molecular cloud that is created by nearly any compound. So that necklace, or the one that goes under your pillow at night, can mimic the presence of nearly any chemical compound. So the chemical compounds that they mimic are specifically designed to create certain responses in the body. Caffeine, just one for alcohol, and you do feel wasted. And you turn it off and you're instantly not under that influence any longer. No acetaldehyde, no reduction in the pH of your blood. There are ones for THC, ones for CBD, melatonin, the compounds that actually put you to sleep, that address pain. And they essentially create the same electron cloud, as that chemical would create if it were in the presence of one of your cell membranes. And so your body behaves as if it's in the presence of that compound, whether it's a narcotic or whether it's there's no addictive tendency to it, whether it's nicotine. There are lots and lots of stories of people quitting smoking by wearing a Hapbee and progressively reducing their dosage of nicotine. I use it on long flights, and I do the 8-hour sleep on long flights. And ironically, I slept 8 hours and 2 minutes. And so I called the guys. I was like, all right, we need to meet, and I need to know. I have a million questions for you. I actually did a podcast with their lead scientist, which is on theultimatehuman.com if you want to watch it. I'm not a big pusher of products. But that's one I believe in, because you don't need the presence of those compounds in order to benefit from the frequency of those compounds.
You definitely piqued my curiosity for Hapbee, which is, as I understand it puts in a mild electric current, but it knows the type of frequency of the electric current that needs to put through your brain to put you in that state.
I know folks that will get dozens of them, and they'll have parties and they'll put them over everybody's head.
That's cool.
Everybody like tipsy at the party, and then when it's time to go home, they turn it off. They turn the caffeine setting on, wake everybody up. You're bone sober. Your blood alcohol level's 0.
You drive home.
And you drive home safely.
Don't need an Uber. Well, Gary Brecka, look, I want to say to you, thanks very much for your generosity. This has been fascinating discussion. I'm looking forward to you being in Australia on the 27th and the 28th of June, as a lot of Australians are going to be looking forward to seeing you in Sydney and Melbourne. Really, I think it's going to be really cool, and I definitely want to catch up with you. I want one of those T-shirts if I can get one, dude. And
I'll bring some down for you guys. I'll bring some swag gear.
You're the man. Thanks very much, Gary.
All right. Very, very great talking to you, brother. Thank you so much for your time.
Same here, man.